I haven't even told Jay this, so you guys are hearing it right along with me. If everything, what's the date today?
Today is the 23rd of January.
If everything goes according to plan, which it's supposed to, next Saturday night, you guys will not be getting a solo podcast.
No, wait, why?
You will be getting Andy Brandy Casagrande. No
way. Are you for real?
ABC is supposed to be coming up next Saturday.
Dude,
of course,
I'm so
ABC
hyped.
Explorer, Andy Brandy Casagrande. He is, please pull Andy up. I mean, he's a Emmy Award-winning shark photographer, probably one of the coolest people on the planet. I mean, this dude, literally, if you've watched a shark show on Discovery Channel, Nat Geo, BBC, he's the guy that shot that film. And here he is with an Emmy right there, standing there looking beautiful.
Look at this guy,
Look at this camera rigs over here. I mean, this guy is sharks for days. So he's literally messaging me last night. So, dude, I think I'm going to fly in next Saturday, do the podcast, hang out till Sunday, fly back on Sunday, and blah, blah, blah. And so we're going back and forth on this series of text messages just about, like, hey, I'd love to be in your vlog a little bit. I'd love to talk to you about, he really wants us to be involved in me and Jay. I'll talk about this off camera, podcast, but he wants to launch a YouTube thing, and he wants to see how can we help him do that. And this guy has some of the most amazing stories and
content.
Just freaking believably cool guy. Love this dude to death. And literally, as we're going back and forth for a good half hour about all this stuff, he's like, oh, well, let me hit you up in the next couple of days. He goes, because I'm 250 miles offshore in a boat on a sat phone right now.
Oh, I love him, dude.
Like, oh my God, he's 250. By the way, the thought of being 250 miles offshore in a boat literally
I can see you shivering.
Cringe.
Yeah.
When I dropped the phone, I was like, oh my God, this guy's gonna die. No human being should be 250 miles.
And he spends his whole life like that.
That's like when I'm in Ivy's cage, and that's my beauty. I'm in Ivy's cage. It's my heaven. His heaven is 250 miles offshore, waiting for sharks.
Yeah, surrounded by great whites. Dude.
Now, don't get me wrong. I want to go out shark diving with this guy more than anything because I love sharks. And even though I fear the ocean 1,000 times more than I fear a shark.
I agree.
So I've got to overcome my fear of being out on a boat offshore a lot. Because I've only been offshore twice in my life where I couldn't see land. And I don't like that feeling. I don't like not being able to see land, And so I need to get over that side. So anyways, I'm
just excited. That's
exactly.
Crazy.
So if everything goes well, next Saturday night, we'll be talking with him about sharks. We'll be talking about conservation. We'll be talking about all kinds of things. I mean, this dude is shot with Shaq. He shot with Snoop Dogg. He shot with
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson. I mean, dude's and
decorated.
One of the most humble, awesome human beings on the planet. And literally, he has seen more of the planet than most people ever probably could. So, all right, let's get back to what we're going to do. The way this usually works is that it's got a little bit of a Q&A, right? So I do expect you guys, and I already know there's some super chats in here. Hit me with some super chats. Hit me with some questions that you want me to answer. I'm going to answer it. I usually start off with a little story time.
Story time. This is a banger, too. I like it.
It's a good one. So I'll start off with some story time about reptiles, old age. This isn't really about a project. It's about an interesting story of a guy that I used to buy rodents from when I was young, like 18, 19 years old. He was my rodent supplier here, and he lived in Detroit.
Yeah.
So this guy named Jeff Schrock, he now lives in Florida. And you guys, if you follow my vlog at all, you might remember a year and a half, 2 years ago when Miguel, Forrest, Brian Cusco, myself, and a couple other people, Stephen Cush, went on this trip to Florida, and we actually went to a place that had albino kangaroos and capybara. That's Jeff Schrock's place down in Florida. Well, he started up here in Michigan. This is the interesting story, is that he was a detective for the Detroit Police Department.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in the city of Detroit, many cities are this way. You have to live within the city limits to work on their police force or fire department. So in Detroit, that's the way it is. Now, in the suburbs, it's not that way. You could live in a different suburb and county and still be a firefighter. But in the city of Detroit, to work for the city, you have to live within the city, And so he lived in the city of Detroit, and he kept reptiles. And he was a police officer, a detective. And one of his neighbors ratted him out for keeping reticulated pythons. So, of course, by the law, he's not allowed to keep reticulated pythons in the city of Detroit. Detroit, by the way, if you guys didn't know this, which is crazy, in the 70s passed a law saying no reptiles. None. No turtles, no snakes, no lizards.
Crazy.
Nothing in the city of Detroit. And that's back in the 70s, okay? And unlike a lot of cities, like New York City, by the way, has a lot of laws against reptiles. Nobody pays attention to them, and everyone keeps reptiles in their city. You know, I mean, I know people that have hundreds of snakes in an apartment in New York City and Manhattan that are not supposed to have them, and no one really cares. You know, it's just the way it is. In Detroit, it's different. When I was 15 and worked at a pet shop that was right on the city limits, which you guys may, everyone that comes visit here for the first time always loves it, of course. You know, the movie 8 Mile with Eminem.
Yeah.
8 Mile is the dividing line between the city and the suburbs, okay? So basically the way Detroit is set up is that 0 mile is city center, and then 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, 4 mile, and then out to 8 Mile. 8 Mile, it's a circle that goes around the city of 8 miles, and that's the city, and everything north or east or west of that circle is the suburbs, okay? We live in the suburbs. We're on 20 Mile Road, so we're 12 miles away from the city limit, and then, of course, 8 miles away from city center. So we're 28 miles away from the city center of Detroit, where we are right now at the Reptarium, or underneath the Reptarium, I should say, in the basement. So now you get the picture. So no reptiles in Detroit. Someone rats out Jeff, and so he has to get rid of his reptiles. You know, I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, even though he's on the police force, he still has to follow the rules, and he has to get rid of them. So what he does, he researches in the laws, what's the most obnoxious animal I can keep legally in the city of Detroit in my backyard? And this goes back into like the probably late 80s, you know, 86, 87. And he found that he could keep emus in his backyard, right? In Detroit. There was no law against keeping emus in his backyard. He knew they made a little noise. They were obviously giant birds. And he's like, you know, it was kind of the big middle finger to his neighbor, right?
Yeah,
like,
of course.
Hey, F you, you know, I'm doing this. So he ended up buying like a little herd or whatever they call them, a flock or whatever of emus. And they were really cheap at the time. Yeah, what is an emu? What is a flock of emus? I'm assuming a flock, right? I don't know. What's a group of emus called?
It's a mob.
A mob.
There you go. It makes sense because they'll mob you for sure.
We've been in with emus that are mob you, definitely.
They're crazy.
So he buys a mob of emus. Well, he starts breeding them, and just so happens that there, you know, and you guys may not know this, in the early 90s, there was a false market for emus. Emus went from being like almost a couple $100 to being literally like $20,000 a piece.
That's so crazy.
You know, so Jeff buys this mob of emus to piss his neighbor off, and within a couple years, his mob of emus is producing baby chicks, and he's selling them for like $40,000 a pair.
That's so crazy.
And so he made bank. I'm talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so he started buying all his neighbors out. Like all their houses. He started buying it. So at one point, I used to still buy my rodents from him. I used to go there and buy my frozen rodents from him like every month. And so you would drive up and literally there'd be like 4 houses that all the backyards fences were taken down. And there's just like 100 emus. We're talking about a suburban residential area with 100 emus just running around in all these backyards. And he literally, before he moved, he bought the entire block. The entire block was now taken up for emus, and he was still on the police force and stuff like that. So he ended up becoming a millionaire and retiring, and then this guy just, you know, rolled in poop and came out smelling like a rose every time. So he ends up saying, fine, like, all right, I'm retiring. I need to move out to a little bit more rural area where I can have a nice farm with all my emus and get some other animals. He wanted to get into kangaroos and stuff like that. So he buys 200 acres out by the airport in a place called Belleville. Ironically enough, that's where Jay, not the Jay, the other Jay, Jay the entertainer, he lives in Belleville. Well, he buys 200 acres for $200,000, $1,000 an acre. Literally, he builds a house out there, moves his stuff out there. Within like 5-10 years, this acreage is going for like $50,000 an acre.
That's so crazy.
So he makes millions of dollars on emus just because of reptiles. He couldn't keep reptiles in the city of Detroit. Then he moves, and then he starts building houses like on the 200 acres, on the other side of the 200 acres, so he doesn't even see stuff. and selling like these cul-de-sacs. He'd build like 13 houses on a cul-de-sac and sell them all for like $400,000 a piece. He's making like
bread.
So he just made. So ultimately, he ended up unfortunately moved down to Florida, because I used to love going over there and seeing it. By time he moved out of Belleville down to Florida, he had some of the only albino kangaroos, albino wallabies. At that point he had downsized his emus to only maybe 8 or 10 emus from a couple hundred probably. But then he had all kinds of hoof stock, and I mean, he's just a crazy cool dude. So I miss seeing him all the time. But now we can go visit him in Florida. But the point is that it's just an interesting story how reptiles didn't work out for Jeff, but yet, this emu thing did. I thought it was an interesting story. And then I remember just before he moved to Florida, and I think this was a little puffery, you know what I mean? And for you guys that don't know what puffery is, that's just basically when people tell tales to make themselves look bigger than they are or something like that. They puff up, right? Puffery. So anyways, Jeff, I was over at his place, and he goes, he was sitting in his living room of his house. This is in Belleville, Michigan. And he goes, "You see that house over there across the street, Brian?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I bought that house the other day." And I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Because their porch light, they would keep it on at night." And he said, "And it would shine in my window in my bedroom." He goes, "So I bought the house so I could shut the light off."
That's incredible.
I don't know if he bought the house, but it was a great story.
and not only that, but in essence, it's real though, right?
Yeah,
because he did buy out his whole neighborhood. Like, he did do all that stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't for the light, but that's so crazy. What a guy, man.
Yeah, so it's just an interesting story how reptiles can do a lot of things in your life. And weirdly enough, he still sells frozen rodents. He's a multi-millionaire, pseudo-retired, and now he does breed wallabies and emus. A small level of emus. I don't think he breeds them just for. I think there's some mutations now of emus.
Wow, really?
Like white, like leucistic emus that he breeds. And then he breeds albino red kangaroos and albino wallabies and Bennett's wallabies and stuff like that. And I think he's just doing that for fun. And I know he had a pair of capybara that were super cool. I don't know if they've ever had babies. And then he had kookaburras, which are cool. That really,
one of my favorite animals.
One of the coolest birds. He has those down there. So when we go down to Florida, Jay and I and Anthony and Noah are going to take a trip to Florida when we feel like the time
when it
is
makes
right.
sense.
Yeah, I mean, in the next couple months for sure. By March, we're going to go down there. We're just waiting for things to calm down a little bit. But we'll go to Jeff's place for sure. We'll go check. And he's a character, man. He's a character. He's a good dude, man, and I love him to death.
Damn, son.
Can we rail this in?